Hello everyone, Francis Walsh here again with the Personal Finance Diaries, and today we're going to be discussing comparing renters insurance quotes. So if your landlord has told you you need renters insurance, or you've just decided you need it yourself, you're probably a little bit confused right now if you're not familiar with the landscape. There are a lot of different providers and a lot of different policies, a lot of different coverage levels, deductibles, extras, all that kind of thing, and it can be quite confusing when you're not used to it, and particularly as it's quite difficult to make an apples to apples comparison between policies, because obviously they all have different deductibles, different extras, different features, all that kind of thing. So comparing like with like can be really difficult. So there's a little bit to unpack here, so I'm going to go through all of this in detail and hopefully help you come to a decision about what policy might best suit your needs. So let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to discuss is what actually impacts renter insurance quotes. So what is behind the number you see on your screen that's going to be the monthly cost of coverage. So there are a number of different factors that are going to be relevant here. So I'm going to go through them each in some detail. First off is going to be location. And location is relevant from a few different perspectives. First of all, there's urban versus rural. Urban houses typically are more expensive to insure than rural ones because there are more risks in terms of crime and all that kind of thing. Another relevant factor is going to be your proximity to hurricane risk areas or flood risk areas. If your property is situated in an area where something like this is a possibility, you're going to be paying more for your renter's insurance. Next, we're going to be looking at coverage amount, and now this one is pretty straightforward. Essentially, the more stuff you're insuring, the higher your premium is going to be. So if you're insuring a property that has, we'll say, $50,000 worth of insurable items in it, that premium is going to cost more than for a house with $15,000 of insurable stuff inside it. Next is deductible amount, and this is something maybe if you haven't got much experience with insurance, you might not be that familiar with all this, but the deductible is essentially the amount that you're going to pay yourself when you make a claim before your insurance kicks in. So essentially, when you take out your policy, you agree to pay a certain amount of the value of any claim up front in the event that a claim arises. So that might be $200, $500, $1,000, $1,500, and the higher your deductible is, the lower your premium is going to be. So essentially, you're accepting a discount on your insurance premium for a higher deductible in the case that you have to make a claim. Claims history. So this is pretty much common to all types of insurance. If you've got a history of making claims, then your insurance premium for new policies is going to be higher. Works the same with motor insurance or health insurance. Say if you had a car accident last year and you go to renew your premium this year, your premium is going to be higher. And the same rules apply for renters insurance. Credit score. Now this is maybe something you wouldn't necessarily have expected, but in most states it is the case that credit score can have an impact on renter insurance. Basically, the higher your credit score is, or the better your credit score is, the lower your premium is going to be. Building characteristics. So if your building is a safer building, it's going to be cheaper to insure. If it's a less safe building, it's going to be more expensive to insure. So the relevant factors here are going to be things like safety features, fireproofing, fire escapes, security alarms, distance from the street. Again, kind of tying into your neighborhood, like how close you are to high crime areas, all that kind of thing. But I suppose this bit is going to be more structured on kind of the structure of the building and, the features it has physically to protect you and protect your property from harm. Pet ownership. Now this is maybe not going to be good news for those of you who have dogs, but dogs in particular can really increase your renter's insurance premium, and particularly certain breeds of dogs. If your dog is from a breed that, has a long history of attacks or of violent behavior, of that kind of thing, even if your own dog is a sweetheart, that's not how the insurance company is going to look at it. It is going to look at it on a breed by breed sort of basis. So if you do have an animal like that is going to be living in your property, you can expect this to increase your premium. Coverage options and add-ons. So your renter's insurance basically will cover things like personal property, liability and loss of use, but there are additional pieces of coverage you can get and choose to pay more for essentially. One common example would be replacement cost coverage. So this like replacement cost coverage is essentially where if you lose an item, you get the money back that you need to actually replace it, rather than the resale value of that item, because the replacement cost tends to be a little bit higher. So you can opt for that when you're taking out your policy and pay a bit extra for it, and then in the event of a claim, you get the higher amount of money back. And finally then, discounts and bundling. So insurance companies will offer you discounts in certain scenarios, most particularly where you have multiple insurance policies with them. So if you insure your car with one insurer and you decide to go with the same insurer for your renter's insurance, they might offer you a discount on your renter's insurance. So next then, how do you actually find the best deal? We've looked at the factors that affect quotes, but how do you weigh up these factors against one another in different policies to figure out which policy represents the best deal for you? As I said, this is a big challenge with renter's insurance because the specifics of each policy tend to vary so much. So what you essentially need to do is make sure you're making an apples to apples comparison in each case. And that means lining up policies with similar features in terms of coverage types, coverage limits, deductibles, and all that kind of thing. So figure out essentially what you need in that regard, figure out what type of coverage you need, figure out what limits you're comfortable with, figure out what deductible you're comfortable with, find policies that, you know, have all those things at those levels that you want, and then consider those policies against one another in terms of their price. One other minor point to note here is customer service and claims reputation. This is one differentiator between insurance companies. To be honest, there aren't many. Insurance companies typically are, you know, they're of a sort, they're all quite similar to one another, but there are some that have a better reputation for paying out in claims than others, and there are some that have a better reputation for customer service than others. So if that's a priority for you, do your research and figure out which insurance company might do that best. But aside from that, essentially, as I was saying, you need to find a way to compare the factors, like with like, against one another, and compare policies then on that basis. Now, this is quite a labour intensive process, so you could do it, I suppose, the old fashioned way, which is to get all these, you know, items in a list on a spreadsheet on one axis, and then have insurance companies and policies on the other axis, and do it that way and figure out where you're getting the best deal. But what I would recommend is using a comparison website, because it just makes things way easier. It's essentially doing that job for you just automatically, but it just essentially takes a lot of the pain out of the process. The comparison tool I use typically and that I recommend using is bestmoney.com, so we're going to have a quick look at that now. And so here you can see the bestmoney.com interface, and as you can see, it's really simple and straightforward and just gets the job done. You can choose to enter your zip code here, so obviously that's probably the most precise way to do this. This also, this is my location up here, so it does automatically track your location kind of in a rough way. But essentially you plug in your zip code here and it will generate recommendations for you on this basis. So you can see here, their top pick is lemonade, and then you can go to view rates then from here, and then they also give you plenty of options further down. There's also some really handy instructional material, some FAQs down here which can help, you know, obviously if you're not familiar with renter's insurance and how it might apply to your situation, this can be really handy. And overall, I just think it provides a better service than a lot of the quote comparison websites out there. One big thing, and you'll see this a lot on Reddit if you do look up these kinds of platforms, a lot of them will take your data and use it to allow insurance companies to contact you and essentially spam you and try to get you to buy their policies. Best Money doesn't do that. It doesn't, you won't be inundated with unwanted correspondence after using the platform. So yeah, I'm a really big fan of Best Money. I just think it takes a lot of the pain out of this process and saves you from endlessly fiddling around with spreadsheets to try and figure out what insurance company might be the best deal for you. But yeah, that's more or less it when it comes to renter's insurance. It can be a little bit complicated and there can be a bit of work involved in finding the right policy for you, but there's nothing to be afraid of. Once you do your research, there are plenty of competent providers out there and you should be able to get it squared away without too much hard work. But yeah, best of luck to anyone who is looking for renter's insurance at the moment. That's all from me on this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.